Hello, welcome to another Beauty and Crime Sunday with me where we talk about different cases while I do my relaxing skincare. Today we are talking about the case of Erik Smith, a case in which a child kills another child. The main issues that we will talk about today is that since Erik was so young, can he be punished as an adult or can be reinserted into society again? What type of steps should we follow when such a young person has done such a cruel crime? So let's start with today's case. We're going to start in a little town in Savona, the state of New York, the 2nd of August of 1993. It's around 9 a.m. and Doreen Robbie, the mom of two children, we're gonna focus on one of us specifically, which is Derek Robbie, in which at the time he was only 4 years old, so very young. She decided that that day was gonna be the very first day that Derek went to summer camp, by himself. She obviously had some internal doubts because Derek was only 4. But since Derek was being so insistent that he wanted to go by himself, and the summer camp was not very far, she decided it would be okay. That decision would haunt her for the rest of her life. Before that, the mom Doreen prepared his lunchbox with a sandwich, a banana, and a Kool-Aid juice. So now Derek was ready to go to summer camp. So he gave Doreen a little kiss and he went on his way. Derek Robbie was born the 2nd of October of 1988. And he was super anxious because the day before, her mother already told him that the next day was gonna be the day that he was gonna go to summer camp by himself. And you know how it is. It was his first time of freedom, let's say, and being more independent. So Derek was super excited because he was gonna be a big boy now. So I suppose in 1993 it wasn't such a big deal to let your kids run around all over the town and be more independent. Also, the summer camp was only 90 meters away and he would have to go all in a straight line. He wouldn't have to cross any roads. So the mom thought it would be fine. Nowadays, I feel like even though it's pretty close, we wouldn't let our kids go by themselves. And even more if he was only 4. I believe our generation knows more now that all the bad things that could happen to that kid. I know in Asia, for example, it's a very common thing to let your kids go to school by themselves. But here in Spain, where I live, people have no respect. If they see a kid like little Derek, a 4-year-old, walking by with his lunchbox, they would probably kick him, take all his stuff, and leave him there. That would be the least that people would do to him, just take his stuff. But I guess it's similar to when your parents were like, oh, but when I was younger, I would have to walk 1,000 miles to go to my school. I think about this case and the mindset that they probably had at that age. But I guess it depends on the culture. I know in the north of Europe, it's also very normal to let your kids walk to school, and in Asia also, but depends the culture, I guess. I'm gonna try to do a sheet mask today, so bear with me. I tried, okay? I hope this sheet mask doesn't fall when I'm talking, so let's try this. When the summer camp finishes, Doreen goes to pick Derek up to the summer camp and realizes he cannot see him anywhere, so goes and asks one of the professors or instructors in the summer camp. And she tells her that Derek never made it to the summer camp. Doreen, obviously completely hysterical, goes running to the police and tells that his little boy is missing. So since Derek was so young, the whole town realizes very soon he's missing, and the whole town starts looking for him. But sadly, 4 hours later, they find little Derek's body. Not very far from where the summer camp was. He was found with a trauma to his head and suffocated. As you can imagine, the news jumped to the opportunity of having this news on the paper. So everyone knew exactly what happened to little Derek the next day. They talked about a little 4-year-old losing his life, and most importantly, in broad daylight. I'm gonna take this off because I cannot talk and do my sheet mask at the same time. I cannot deal with it. So, the scene of the crime was very brutal if we think only about a 4-year-old child that cannot probably even defend himself. Derek had some marks on his neck as if he was suffocated, but they realized the marks of the hand were of little hands. It wasn't really a big hand, it was little marks. So they assumed that in a friendly manner, someone talked to little Derek and brought him into the forest, inside the forest, since he did not have any marks of being dragged or forced into the forest. So they assumed that he was willingly going to where the crime actually happened. At first, they also thought that probably an adult did this because it was such a brutal crime. So they started looking at sex offenders in the area, but they never thought that a kid could be capable of doing this. So the police, while looking at the body, they realized that once Derek's body was suffocated to death, the murderer took a rock of 12 kilos and dropped it on top of Derek's little body. And he kept doing that, I think, 2 times or 3 times. So his body was destroyed. Then he took all the stuff that Derek was wearing, took it off from his body, took a branch and inserted it in his backside. If that wasn't enough, they realized that the lunchbox was open. The banana was smashed on the floor in a very aggressive manner. The sandwich with the napkin that the sandwich had was all made into a bowl and was inserted in little Derek's mouth. And the Kool-Aid that he had on his lunchbox was half drunk and then scattered all around Derek's body. The scene looked like someone very malevolent did this because he's only a 4-year-old child. Who would be this mad or that aggressive to a 4-year-old that it's so indefensive? So the investigators had a lot of pressure to solve this case. So first of all, they decided to talk to all the classmates in the summer camp, even though they were all children. So it wasn't really an interrogation, it was more like open interviewing. The investigators, they mostly wanted to know if someone saw Derek that day. And at first, all the people said, nope, I did not see him that day. On the 3rd day, a little 13-year-old redhead boy voluntarily said he saw him while he was leaving summer camp. And well, if you have been paying attention, you know that's not true because he never made it to summer camp. So how did you see him exactly? So this little boy, this 13-year-old boy, was called Erik Smith. And who is this boy exactly? Even though he was being very helpful at the beginning, he was leaving out a couple things to the police, like he wasn't supposed to be there. He wasn't supposed to be attending summer camp. That exact date, he was actually expelled from the summer camp for being annoying to other kids because he was not supposed to be there. So one of the professors told him to leave. This boy was born the 22nd of January in 1980s. And before we keep talking about the story, I'm gonna go more deep dive into who is Erik Smith. So Erik Smith was born in the 22nd of January of 1980, and his family was formed by Tammy, his mother, which was married to Ted Smith, who is the stepfather of Erik Smith. But since he adopted Erik since he was very young, that's why he has his surname. Also, in addition to that, Erik had two other older sisters. As we can all guess, Erik did not have the best family situation. He lacked a lot of self-esteem because he was being bullied at school very harshly. This is sad, but he was being bullied a lot for being a redhead and having a lot of freckles, with also his massive glasses. That did not help. And you know, anything that makes you different, it's something that you can get bullied for. It is the sad truth, but that was what was happening to him. Also, his behavior was a little different from other people. He was very reserved, and honestly, I understand, because if you've been bullied your whole life since you were a kid, I would also be very reserved. He knew that he'd fit in school, and this caused inside of him a lot of anger. If someone made fun of him, he wouldn't be the typical kid that would go into the bathroom and cried. No, he would explode. And on many occasions, he actually hurt his classmates. But the classmates kept bullying him. They would call him stupid or slow. Since even though he was 13, he had a mental capacity of an 8 or 9-year-old. This will explain a lot in the case. So when Erik started to talk to the police, they started to feel like he was being a little bit suspicious. They felt like he definitely had something to do with it. He said that he saw Derek from a specific location, but the police realized that from that specific location you couldn't really see anything. So the police knew that he was lying. So they started to confront him very lightly at first, until he said, yeah, oops, sorry, no, I saw him from this location. So now he's changing the story. It's still suspicious. Also, we need to add that Erik knew exactly what Derek was wearing at that exact date, and what he had inside his lunchbox, which makes no sense, because how could you see what he had in his lunchbox from afar? I am assuming that he wasn't showing the lunchbox to everyone and everywhere while he was walking. That would be very weird. So he basically confessed. Lastly, since he was being so suspicious, the police decided to take Erik to recreate when he saw little Derek. And I don't know how or why, if his little mind was playing tricks on him, but Erik took the police very close to where Derek's body was found. The police later said that it looked like Erik was having fun while doing all this, because the police was giving him attention. So the police were about 90% sure that Erik did it, but they had to be convinced that it was him since he was only 13. That's crazy, a kid killing another kid. So while the police were finishing and connecting the dots, Erik's neighbor was doing an investigation all by herself. The neighbor Marlene was also feeling suspicious about Erik. Marlene ended up telling the police that she started investigating because Erik at one point asked her what would happen if whoever did this to Derek was a child. And she answered, well, if it was a kid, they would probably take him to get psychiatric help because he's not okay in the brain. And then he also asked if the DNA can be traced to whoever did this, like they did on movies. Marlene thought that these questions were definitely weird to be asking after what just happened. with little Derek. And since this is a very super small town, everyone knew what happened to little Derek's body. The details of the crime were known by everyone. So they knew that in the crime scene there was a smashed banana on the floor. And she thought that that was very childish, because a normal adult would say, okay, no, I don't like the banana, and he would just ignore it probably, but taking the banana and just smashing on the floor, she thought that was a very childish thing to do. So this woman decided to go to the supermarket and buy a banana and a couple other things. And she went to the Smith's home, and she obviously offered the banana to Erik. And Erik did not just reject the banana. He was like, oh, no, 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 no. Disgusting, I don't like the banana. And while Marlene thought, weird, that's definitely weird, but because he doesn't like a banana, it doesn't make him a murderer. But she decided to still tell all these details to the police, just in case. Not only Marlene was doubtful about Erik at this point, even his family started having doubts that he had something to do with it. They didn't think that he killed him. They maybe thought that maybe he saw something and he doesn't want to say because he's scared of something. But this is what the family told the police officers later. Before Derek's body was found, a couple of days before, Erik went home and he was very anxious, he was very mad, and he asked the stepfather, how can I get rid of this aggressiveness that I have inside, this madness that I have inside? And the stepfather, very simple, he said, oh, you just have to pick a sandbag and just punch it until you are not mad anymore. He sounds like the typical macho father that tells their kids not to cry because they need to be a man. So a couple days later, Erik got home and he had some blood in his knuckles and blood in his pants. And the mother asked him, what did you do? Where were you? So he answered that he took Ted's advice and he was punching a sandbag in the garage. The police did not know all of this at the beginning. So police were still trying to investigate what happened to Derek and make sure that they were 100% sure that it was Erik. So they would keep making Erik come back to recreate the steps that happened. And at one point, Erik felt so pressured that he started shaking. And he said, I'm not a person to kill or molest anyone. The police kind of ignore him. And they're like, oh no, what do you mean? We don't think that. You killing someone? No, 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 we don't think that. But deep down, they're thinking the details of the Brandt's situation in little Derek's body was not known to the public, so how does he know? Also, while they were recreating all of this, they were having little breaks, and at one point, the police brought him Kool-Aid, the drink that Derek had in his lunchbox. And what the police did was hide the brick, so he couldn't see what type of juice it was. And then when it was handed over to him and realized it was the Kool-Aid, he threw it on the floor. And he said, you think I did it, don't you? Still very suspicious behavior. And well, if any police officers had his doubts about Erik, now 100% they knew it was him. All these psychological tricks on Erik's brain exhausted him so much that he ended up confessing to his mother the 8th of August. And he said, yes, I killed little Derek. I got so mad. I'm sorry. The family took him to the police straight away, so he would tell the police everything. And as the interrogation progressed, you could see he was getting even more excited while he was telling the police everything. So this case started getting all over the news because it was shocking to see all the picture of Erik surrounded by the massive police all around. And they started to call him the Freckle-Faced Murderer. Also, the reporters started digging about his past, and they started finding things about his family. It was discovered that Ted was essaying one of the sisters, and this was confirmed because one of the sisters actually confirmed it, and after Ted also confirmed. Also, the neighbor Madeline. Bro, I think this neighbor is the typical neighbor that it's on the window looking if she can get any gossip. She was helpful in the investigation, but like, boof, she's everywhere. She confessed that she saw Ted in many occasions taking off his belt and spanking Erik on the back. Even more when Erik had those aggressive outbursts in his school, then he would go home and was spanked by the stepfather. So he had no place to relax or escape from. Allegedly, because this is not confirmed, nobody confirmed it, and Ted says this did not happen. They say it is very probable that Erik was essayed by his stepfather, like with his sister. This is assumed because he used that branch on little Derek's body and put it inside of him. And usually a 13-year-old boy, and more in 1993, you wouldn't really know you could do that to someone if that did not happen to you. And they thought that it was very probable that it was hurting Derek as the same way that someone was hurting him. I'm saying all of this to analyze how Erik got to that point. I'm not trying to make any excuses for what he did or trying to make it look like, oh, it was because of this reason. I love to understand why these cases end up being like this, or the psychology behind the whole case. This case maybe could have been prevented if he would have gotten the psychological care he needs, because he was already showing a lot of aggressive symptoms, and that something was definitely not okay with his brain. Later, it was also known that Erik suffocated another neighbor's cat, and we know what this usually means. That's like the first step in psychopathy. All this said, we are gonna move to a year later, in August 1994, the day of the sentencing. They talked about his background, his home life. They wanted to show that he was also a victim in the story, that this should be considered, and that he couldn't really control his actions, that Erik had depression and intermittent explosive disorder. However, the prosecutors brought an analysis of a lot of psychologists in which it said that everything that happened in his house and at school, it's not what determined his behavior. They thought that his aggressive outbursts were because he couldn't really express his feelings, so that would make him explode. That made them think that Erik was completely disequilibrated and that he would definitely do it again. So he wouldn't be able to be reinserted into society later in life. The psychologists believe that inserting a branch on the back side of little Derek was a behavior of an adult. He was doing the same behavior that he was probably receiving. So the defense said that they possibly found the reason why Erik was being so aggressive. And the reasoning was that Tammy, when she was pregnant with Erik, she had to take this medication called Tridione. And this could have provoked a disorder called the explosive intermittent disorder that we talked about before. This disorder is focused on explosive anger attacks and having a very volatile and unmanageable behavior. So that is when Erik was subject to a lot of psychological tests, but they came out all that he was normal. And they couldn't really prove that the medication made him like that. So Erik had very weird behaviors during the hearing. When his mom went to talk about his life, it looked like he couldn't really be bothered, like he was bored. And in other occasions, when the prosecutors were saying things that he thought they were lying, he would get this aggressive outburst in which he would start smashing his head on the floor until he was bleeding. But after all this, it was decided to sentence him as an adult, even though he was 13 at that time. So finally, in August 1994, he was declared guilty in second degree, and he was sentenced to 9 years to life. Also, when the sentencing was read, the prosecutor said that one of the scariest parts of the case was that if Erik was not captured, he was definitely going to do it again. He also said that he thought that in jail he would probably not get any better. So Erik was sent to juvenile center until he was 21, and then he was moved to an adult jail. However, when he was 24 years old, he was finally eligible for parole. But he was denied since he said that probably he would do it again. But even though he was denied, he would be eligible for parole every 2 years. So he ended up asking for parole 10 more other times. He was denied every single time until the last one. He did all the steps correctly to get the parole. He said he was sorry. He explained his childhood, why he did it, that he was guilty of everything. And when he was asked, why did you do it? He answered, because instead of me getting hurt, I was hurting someone else. Also, when you ask for parole, you always have to put the address of where you're gonna live. So he explained that he was gonna live with his mom in Sabona, where everything happened. And that his idea was to make money because he was going to live with his girlfriend, a lawyer that he met in jail in 2009. But he ended up being in jail 27 years more, since the parole was denied every single time, until the 17th of November 2021, where he was eligible for parole again. But this time, he was finally granted parole at the age of 41. So in February 2022, Smith was finally released. And looks like since then he's doing exactly what he was going to do, get money to live with his girlfriend. So a pretty normal life. And I hope that keeps being the case. We know that the Robbie family, specifically the mom, did not want Erik to leave jail. So she even tried to change the law. Because in the USA, once you have done your time and you can ask for parole, you are eligible for parole every 2 years. So she wanted to change that and make eligible for parole every 5 years instead of 2. But the law was not changed. So they decided to leave Sabona because it was very painful to live there, all the memories that they had. So they ended up leaving also because Doreen, the mom, was being judged every single day because she left his son of only 4 years old to go by himself. A lot of people did not understand. They would say she was a bad mom. And all that bad feedback that she was getting, that she was already feeling guilty for what happened, it was destroying her little by little, so they decided to leave. So after looking at Erik Smith's case, one thing is clear. There are so many unanswered questions. Why did this happen? Why didn't anyone see the warning signs? And what does this say about a system that was supposed to protect him? Do you think Erik can be rehabilitated into society again? Or do you think he cannot? It's a very complex case that leaves more unanswered questions than answers. I would love to know what you think. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel if you want to know about more cases like this. And if you're interested in me talking about a specific case that maybe I have never heard about, also drop it in the comments. Thanks for watching, and remember, do your skincare, and if you don't end up like a glazed donut at the end of it, you're not doing it right. Bye bye.